Oh, it's you again.
Welcome back.
That's weird. I'm Marc. I'm a professional artist and an art teacher. And today I'm going to show you what I think is the best coloring technique there is. Something that I've used for years, except now it's better. So equip your smudge guard, whip out your pens, and let's get started. So I've made a few coloring videos over the years, and through a lot of trial and error, this time I really think I've developed the perfect method. So I'll let you in on my trade secret if you pay the class fee of 1 like or 1 sub. Otherwise your art will be cursed. Don't cheat. So if you have a character drawing like this to color, in my case the bad girl from Dragon Ball Daima, let's go over the full process so that you too can color like a pro. I'm doing this in Photoshop, but Clip Studio Paint will work exactly the same way. So if you're using something else, what's wrong with you? You should just start using Clip Studio Paint. Using gradient maps to color a grayscale drawing is going to be at the core of this method. And it's consistently been my favorite approach because it allows you to focus on each step one at a time, which is much easier and far better to target your weaknesses compared to doing it all at once like some artists do, like I do sometimes. Those steps, as we'll cover them, are these right here. First, the sketch, then the clean line art, optional, then the shading in grayscale, then adding the colors with gradient maps, the lighting if needed, and finally painting the material properties. Now this method is also great because after each step you'll be left with something that's good enough to post on social media, so you can post more content to keep the algorithm happy. But enough hyping this up, let's actually do it. So the first obvious step will be to draw your sketch. Now, if you prefer a more painterly style with no line art visible at the end, like this maybe, a sketch is all you need. But we can also draw a clean line art like I have here if the lines will remain and be a part of the style in the end, you know, like something like this instead. Up to you really. I do both depending on how I feel. And I have this inking brush that I made a few months back that I use all the time now. I added it to my free brush sets that you can download with the link in the video description. It's free. But yeah, that's our first step and it's done. And here, that's something that I can post. Now we're moving on to the shading, and it's real simple, but we'll need to set up a few things, so pay attention. So for each part of the character, we'll use the selection tool to fill or just paint in a light gray color, or a very light version of the color that you plan to use. It really doesn't matter for the end result, so keep it gray if you're unsure, but maybe you want to start brainstorming colors at this point. In my case, I kind of know her colors already, so I'm just gonna add them in there. Either way, just keep it light because it'll be easier to paint the shading that way. And if you have a bunch of smaller details, you can put them all on the same layer to avoid having like too many. And we're not gonna use gradient maps to color small stuff anyways. So I have my stack all set up here. Do take a few extra seconds to name them and keep things organized. It'll save you many headaches later. But now that everything is on its own layer, everything else we'll be adding will be set as clipping masks to those base layers. Clipping masks are super simple too. Since the next step will be to paint the shading in grayscale, let's add a new layer on top of the skin layer, for example, and convert it into a clipping mask. Like this in Photoshop or like that in Clip Studio Paint. And you can tell that it is a clipping mask now that it's turned red. In Photoshop, instead, we get these little arrows to indicate that anything that we paint on these clipping masks will only be applied to the first normal layer directly below. So the skin layer in this case. See how easy? Now we just gotta change this layer's blend mode to multiply to be able to see the color underneath, and I'll just shade away. We'll want to then repeat the same process for each part of our character. And you can see with all of the shading layers added, our stack of layers is starting to get a little fat, but we can color code the layers to help sort things out visually. I personally always use red for the base layers. That's the one that's not a clipping mask. And then I'll use green for the line art that I have at the top of my stack here, and blue for all of the shading layers. This way, I know right away what each of these is, and it saves a lot of time. And I'll also lock my base layers so that I can't draw them by accident, like mistakenly start painting the shading on them instead of the clipping masks. It happened a few times, so I've learned from my mistakes. And as I work on this, I want you to notice how I use the full range of values for the shading, going from full black to full white, using every shade of gray in between. One common reason why your gradient map coloring won't or might not look good is when the contrast is just too high in your values. When you use too much black and white and not enough of the grays in between, or when you just don't go dark enough or don't use enough light colors. If you use the full range of values though, you should be all good. And now that I've shaded every part, that's step 2 done. Whether you decide to keep your line art or not, you should be able to hide it at this point, and the drawing should keep its form. That's, usually a good sign that you're pretty much ready to move on to the colors. Exciting. Because right now, with my light colors in there, things look pretty muddy. Not nice. But that's about to change. If you've never used gradient maps before, this might blow your mind. So let's start with the skin again. We'll create the first gradient map by going down here and clicking gradient maps, which should create a new layer on top of our shading clipping mask layer. In Clip Studio Paint, it's just slightly different. You just gotta go up here and select it in the menu. The result is the same though, and now it's being applied to everything below, which we don't want. So I'll set that new layer as a clipping mask again, which should just constrain the effect to the skin layer only, like the shading. Now we still need to edit that gradient map though, so let's double click on this and the gradient map menu should pop up if you closed it, because usually it pops up automatically when you create one. And here you'll have a bunch of Photoshop defaults, but I have my own that I usually start with and modify. And you can actually also get those from my QBrush store with the link in the video description. And while you're there, you should check out my complete art education program, Art School for Digital Artists. It's equivalent to a Bachelor of Fine Arts in content, but with a heavy focus on digital arts instead. It's a massive program and it's going to be on sale until the end of the month because the spring sale is launching. If you've been looking to take your art to the next level, learning along 27,000 other registered students, and developing your skills together on our private Discord server, check all the details with the link to the program in the video description. It's the world's most popular online art program for a reason. Alright, with my shameless plug over, let's adjust this gradient. Gradient maps are awesome because unlike any other coloring method, they can apply a different color to any part of the value range. So for instance, if I want my dark tones to be like more red, I can set that here and then choose entirely different colors for the rest of the values, like the midtones and the highlights. So with a single layer, I can get all of these beautiful colors instead of the monochrome poop that we started with. And if I ever want to change things up, well, I can just go back and edit any of my gradients at any time, so it's super flexible. We used a similar workflow when I was working at Blizzard because of how easy it was to make edits. My workflow now, many years later, is just an evolution of that, arguably better. But now that I have all my gradient maps done, this character is starting to look a lot better, I think. And that's another step done. So we're moving on to highlights. And now instead of working part by part like we have so far, we'll just want to group everything that we've done together, except the line art layer that just remains on top there, because on top of that group, we'll create a new layer that we'll call highlights. And that's also going to be a clipping mask that's going to be affecting the whole character this time, or the whole group. So I'll usually set its blend mode to either overlay or hard light. Honestly, try both and use the one you prefer. But yeah, now we're ready to paint the light. So I'll just say that my light will be coming from this direction here, and using a very light color, I'll try to imagine where that light might be visible on a character. You don't have to guess though. If you need a reference, don't hesitate to use one like Magic Poser Web that I feel like I'm plugging in every single video. So here we have the light off and on. Looks pretty cool. That's another step done. We're making good progress. We just have our final step left. So what we have here is not bad, but there's no material definition. Like everything is kind of this matte surface. In reality though, we'd expect some parts to be shinier maybe, for there to be some reflections. So we're going to be creating new clipping masks, but only for the parts that we want to add reflections to. Like some fabrics might not need it, but the eyes and lips should be kind of shiny, right? So let's create a new layer set to hard light, and we'll make that into a clipping mask again. And this is where we'll softly paint in those subtle highlights. This skin might also need some, and with this layer, we can also add some blush on the cheeks, the eyeliner, same with the redness at the tip of the fingers, basically anything that helps us define those materials. This step I think is a lot of fun because it makes a big difference, yet it takes very little time in comparison to everything else. And here I have all the steps side by side, and you can see the materials we worked on at the end really helped make this pop. At least I think. And well, that is my current gradient map method. It's perfection, or as close to it as it'll get, I think. You should try it too. Now you two have the power! I think this came out pretty good. What do you think? And well, that's going to be it for this week's class. So let me know if you'd like a new class focused maybe on shading or lighting in the near future, since I didn't really have much time to explain today. Or if you have any suggestions for a future video. I still read every comment on my videos, even though I might not respond to most of them because ain't nobody got time for that. And while you wait for next week's video, check out these other art classes that I think you'll enjoy too. I'll see you in there.